And good evening again. This is Satan's Trilogy. I am the author and the narrator. This is chapter 4, and it will be reading 37. Hope you enjoy it. Day said to Esther, "We are not laughing at you, Esther, but for a young woman with so many options, it's both shocking and amazing that you are choosing a future in cooking." Day then went on to defend Esther's choice. Perhaps 20 years ago, being a chef didn't offer much of a future, but today, with the cable channels on television favoring cooking shows, he just might become very famous. Esther smiled. It didn't matter to her what others thought about her chosen career. She was in love with cooking, and that was all that mattered. Making her final comment, Esther said, "Thanks, Day, but I don't need fame. I simply want to become a great chef. If my cooking can excite people, then I'll be happy. I want to satisfy anyone that eats at my table." Day said, "Esther, I love you, and if that's your goal in life, I want you to achieve it. After all, if any of us find a career that we are happy with, then that is the foundation of a happy life." Everyone agreed and started talking between each other about possibilities that the school scholarship now offered. It seemed obvious that anyone who applied themselves could and would receive a scholarship. It was as if everyone had just won the lottery. Day leaned over to Esther and said to her, "Esther, this Thursday night at the downtown Civic Center is a professional wrestling event held by the World Organization of Wrestlers. We all have to go." Day was looking serious. "Before and after the wrestling, we'll see the Black Gothic Band. They are the inside of Gothic music. I think you'll love their music. It has deep bass sounds and great lyrics. Also, our favorite wrestler is going to be there." Day was getting excited and in a thrill of enthusiasm said, "Bo Jackson will be there. You are going to love his hair, not to mention his physique." Day blushed just a bit, having shown her enthusiasm for this wrestler. "Don't worry about the tickets. Dad gets them free for posting their posters at the store. We'll all go to the greatest show on earth." Day then became distracted. "Oh my God, look at the time. I have to be home in 12 minutes. I love you all. See you at school tomorrow." Chris, Helen, and Eve all jumped up. They had arrived with Day, and all were expected home for various reasons. Everyone gave touch hugs, cheek bumps before leaving. Esther watched as the four girls rushed out of the restaurant. Chris stayed behind as did Raven and Esther. "Do you want to sit a while longer?" asked Esther, directing the question to Raven. "Sure, I don't have anywhere to go," Raven said rather plainly. "Do you mind if I stay?" "I have a well before I have to go to work," said Chris. "Of course not, Chris. You are part of this club. You belong," said Esther, with a big smile directed at Chris. The three sat quietly for a couple of seconds, sipping their drinks. Then Raven spoke to Esther while gazing off in a trance. "You know, Esther, my boyfriend was kind of cute. I really did like him." Raven had a problem looking at Esther while confessing her true emotions. "Esther, how do I deal with this?" Raven still couldn't look at Esther. "Raven, in China I had many masters that taught me a lot about life, and they all told me the same thing. Your life is your own. Make it what you want it to be." Esther grinned. "What they were saying is that you need to find happiness within yourself, and then life will unfold itself." Esther smiled. You know, some things don't translate as well as others, but I think you know what I am saying. Your happiness is not based on someone else. It should be from within. Finally, smiling at Raven, Esther said, "Tomorrow is a new day. Sometimes starting over leads to better opportunities." Raven thought for a moment and then seemed to find some peace in Esther's words. She then looked up at Esther and asked another question. "Esther, did you hunt down the people that killed your dad?" Esther waited a few seconds to respond. She pulled Chris and Raven closer to her and whispered to them, "I didn't have to. They hunted me down." Esther paused, then smiled. That was their last mistake. Esther then leaned back and was quiet. "Raven, I need to take you home. I have to prepare supper for my aunt, and I'll need to go by my father's grocery store first." Chris quickly spoke up. "I don't have to be at work for a while. Perhaps I could take Raven home." Somewhat startled at Chris's suggestion, Esther spoke up. "All right, Raven, the choice is yours. Freeze on the back of my bike or ride in that awesome Camry that Chris has customized. What do you think?" Curious and yet expecting an obvious answer, Esther waited for Raven to respond. Raven raised her blackened eyelids to Esther and said, "I love your bike, and I want to own one as soon as possible, but I'll go home in that awesome custom Camry, and I'll see you tomorrow, Esther." Raven leaned forward, gave Esther a kiss on the cheek, and jumped up from the table. "Chris, let's go. I live about 12 minutes from here. Do you own a Garmin?" Chris eagerly stood up and followed Raven as she turned towards the table on her way out of the restaurant and smiled at Esther. Esther smiled and thought to herself, perhaps this is the start of a new opportunity for Raven and Chris. The waiter came up and started to clear the table. Esther took a look at the thin young man wearing entirely white. She smiled at him. "Hey, you did a great job bringing our drinks. Thanks for taking care of our table." Esther had left a $10 bill on the center of the table. "Have a great evening," Esther said as she moved towards the front of the restaurant with her tab in hand. Esther walked away. The young man stood still as he followed her with his eyes, not because of her attractive shape, but because he had never been given a $10 tip. This was more than the entire night would usually produce. He stood there gazing and forgot to say thank you. Esther was on her ninja and starting to pull her helmet on as the waiter ran out to the parking lot and stopped in front of her. "Hey, I wanted to say thanks for the tip. It was really generous, and I can certainly use it." Esther lowered the helmet to her side. "Look, my friends and I might come here this time of the day during the week. I really appreciate the service you gave us, considering we only ordered Cokes and one tea." "That's all right. It's a slow time of the day anyway." Smiling at Esther, he decided to share some of his history. "My girlfriend and I just had a baby girl, and I decided to drop out of school this semester," said the young waiter. This piqued Esther's interest. "Where did you go to school?" "Grant High, but I really need to make some money. I have a lot of hospital bills because of the baby." The young man looked troubled by his decision. "Look, I just started Grant High this semester, and they announced a new scholarship program for everyone in school. You need to go back to school tomorrow and forget dropping out. If you can maintain a C average for the semester, the scholarship will pay for any higher education that you want, and it will pay your expenses too." Esther could see she had his interest. "My name's Esther." "What's yours?" Adam Knight," he said with some hesitation. Esther paused for a moment. "Adam was my father's name. I think that he would want me to help you. Go back to school tomorrow and apologize that you missed the first day of school. Be truthful with them and explain that you want to work hard for your family. I think that Mr. Mason won't have any problems with seeing you in school. He wants to see everyone at Grant High succeed in life." Adam, you'll need to work out some part-time hours with your employer. Do you think he'll understand? Adam was slightly lost in a whirlwind of thoughts, but then said, heck yes. Pete pleaded with me not to drop out of school, but I didn't have any choice. The hospital was breathing down my back for money. Look, Adam, there are people that buy debts and charge interest for delayed payment. I can find someone that will buy your debt and wait for you to earn a degree before you'll be asked to start making payments. How does that sound to you? Esther watched as Adam became overwhelmed and started to realize he might have a better life ahead of him after all. Esther looked at Adam. You know, having a family and working for a degree won't be easy. Adam smiled. I know, but my girlfriend is the best. She'll work with me for our future. Esther smiled. All right then, Adam. I have 2 questions for you, and then I have to go. What hospital was your little girl born at? She was born at St. Francis. Adam was smiling. His face suddenly showed the happiness of a promising future. What's the other question? Esther grinned a little. What did you name your baby girl? Adam smiled, paused a moment, then said, My mom had 3 boys, but always wanted a little girl. She was going to name her Sally Ann, and so we chose that name for our daughter, Sally Ann Knight. We use her middle name, though, and call her Anne. Pulling her helmet over her head, Esther said, Perhaps we'll see each other tomorrow at school. Make certain that you stop at the office and talk to Mr. Mason. In less than 6 minutes, Esther was at Chin-Ho grocery store. Esther walked into the store and greeted her father. Father, it is good to see you. And how has the day been for you? Esther was genuinely interested in her father's affairs and wanted to know the details of his day. Esther, it is good to see you. Day usually goes home after school and spends some time studying her books. Are you doing well in school? Mr. Chen asked with sincere interest. Father, I have been blessed with the ability to do well in school. I want you to know that my goal in life is to become a great chef. Mr. Ho thought for a moment. You obviously know the direction that is best for you. I feel great pride in having a daughter that is a chef. Esther looked at her father and was pleased that he accepted her decision to become a chef. I will not disappoint you, Father. Then Esther smiled and said, I'll need a few groceries for tonight's dinner with my aunt. Mr. Ho said, Esther, please take what you need. I must meet your aunt someday. We have much in common. I agree. I'll talk with my aunt tonight. Perhaps we can have dinner soon at my new home. Esther started to collect the items she needed for a fine dinner with her aunt. She placed items in a small basket which she had grabbed at the front of the store. Pasta, tomatoes, fresh lettuce, radishes, carrots, and some fruit for dessert. Placing the items on the counter, Mr. Ho glanced at the items and proclaimed, But daughter, you chose some excellent foods for tonight. I see that you will make a fine chef, a very fine chef. Esther smiled at her father. I have received training from several great chefs, and finding fresh and quality food is the first step in making an excellent meal. But I know there is still much for me to learn. Putting the groceries in her backpack, Esther said, Father, I must help with the store. Please tell me when I can help, and I will be here. Mr. Ho looked at Esther and nodded his head in agreement. I asked Day to help on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. If she is free on the weekend, she helps 2 or 3 hours on Saturday and sometimes Sunday. I don't open until noon on Sundays. That allows us time to go to morning church. Then Mr. Ho decided to ask an unexpected question. Esther, do you believe in God? With a bright and cheerful laugh, Esther responded, Of course, Father. Miracles don't just simply happen. A customer was all ready to check out, so Mr. Ho quickly said, Esther, why don't you come with Day this Saturday, and she can show you what her routine is. Wonderful. See you on Saturday, Father. Esther leaned over the counter and gave Mr. Ho a hug, then grabbed her backpack and left. Esther was home in less than 15 minutes, pulling the Ninja into her parking space. Esther sat on her bike and looked at the apartment complex. A feeling of contentment came over Esther. She was making a new home, with new friends, and her family was growing. Esther chuckled to herself. Mr. Hung proclaimed himself her uncle, and his cousins, the realtor Bo Chen and the motorcycle dealer Kei Yan, all had accepted her as a cousin. Esther knew she was blessed, and when Dae Ho took Esther as her sister and Mr. Ho accepted her as a daughter, a void in Esther's heart was nearly filled. No one would or could replace her dad, but Esther knew her dad expected her to go on without him. All of this Esther was certain would please her dad. Entering the apartment, Esther quickly checked the thermostat. 66 degrees was an excellent temperature for the apartment. Taking the backpack to the kitchen, Esther pulled out the groceries and placed the vegetables into the refrigerator crisper drawer. The tomatoes were left on the countertop. The spaghetti sat on the countertop along with the tomatoes as Esther prepared some water to boil. Brandy wouldn't be home for 90 minutes. Plenty of time to exercise in the third bedroom. Exercising once in the morning and once in the evening, Esther would go to the third bedroom and exercise her body. Keeping it fit was what Esther knew best. Her entire life had been physical challenges presented by monks that others had failed, but she excelled at them all. Never did Esther find an exercise or program physically challenging. Her body had developed into a perfect physique. Esther calmly removed her clothing and pulled on a pair of tight shorts and a tank top. Going into the empty room and closing the door behind her, Esther went to the center of the room and stood for a moment, focusing on the actions she would now practice: strikes, throws, joint manipulations, and pressure points. She would visualize them all and work in a rapid progression to defeat her imaginary opponents at a blinding speed. In exactly 60 minutes, Esther threw her last strike and pulled herself up, standing again at the center of the room. The timer had set on her phone and started to sound off. She walked over to the phone lying on the floor and turned off the timer. Opening the bedroom door, Esther walked to the bathroom, pulling off her clothes as she approached the shower. Glancing into the mirror over the sink, Esther looked at herself. She had not broken a sweat. Her heartbeat had already returned to normal, and she knew that there was plenty of time to start dinner. A vision of her father talking to her on her 16th birthday swept through her thoughts. Be fit and ready for the unexpected, Esther. Sadly, this road offers both beauty and ugliness. Embrace the first and be wary of the second. Esther could see her dad as clearly as the day he spoke those words. I love you, Dad, Esther said aloud, and then took her shower. And that